This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability and a generous investment by Julianne Wrigley.
I wanted to begin by saying that I don't watch a lot of television other than sports. I watch sports. But I've become really kind of intrigued and disturbed by this phenomenon of reality TV. And so there's apparently one of these reality TV shows that's been running for 2 years or so. It's got an incredible budget. Production budget is expected to be something like $5.8 billion when it's done. I mean, talk about values here. It's building to an audience participatory climax. So I decided to watch a couple of episodes of this recently, and I was really, distressed on the one hand, and I found it distressing on the one hand and comical on the other. And I don't know, maybe some of you in the room may have seen it. It's called The Amazing Presidential Race, and it's about to culminate in a couple of weeks here. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that it's impossible for us not to have experienced this, lived through this, without recognizing that our nation is really at an inflection point in history right now. We're facing an increasingly uncertain we're facing an uncertain and complex strategic environment that is characterized increasingly by the interdependence of markets and peoples and cultures and ideologies, but also by the increasing global competition for finite resources, chief among them being food and developable soil to sustain the growth of the food, water, and sources of energy. Well, this inflection point in history, it clearly transcends politics. It's a much greater issue than that. But it also occurs to me that civilizationally, we are in the midst of probably the greatest epochal shift for civilization since the age of the Enlightenment, which was also referred to as the age of certainty. And this shift that we're undergoing, that we've been experiencing for a couple of decades now, is pretty euphemistically referred to as either the information age or, as Joshua Ramo puts it, the age of uncertainty, which I will come back to because whether you want me to or not, I'm going to cover about 380 years of science and philosophy and politics in the next 40 minutes or so. So the reason I'm bringing this up is that I think even more than being at an inflection point in our national history, we are finding ourselves, truthfully, at a Darwinian moment in time, where civilization is recognizing that in the next 40 years, there's going to be something like 9 billion people on the planet with a finite set of resources, and the 3 largest countries in the world emulating a model of economic growth that was developed in the United States primarily in the 1950s, when we were little mindful of the finite nature of resources or the expected population explosion. So this all makes for a very interesting future for mankind, actually. And it's come to a point where we need to recognize that we need to adapt if we're going to evolve. Now, I was gratified to hear that Jim teaches evolution, because I'm a huge fan of Charles Darwin and Origin of Species. And what Darwin asserts is that, truthfully, we only evolve as species through the strength derived from competition. And I'm going to come back to that, because right now what we need to do is basically we need to recognize that the model of growth that we have developed, which is heavily dependent on fossil fuels and easily transportable liquid petroleum, is not only becoming increasingly difficult to maintain, it's probably killing us in the process. Now, I won't go into, although I'm happy to answer questions about anthropogenic effect on the atmosphere, but I think it's much bigger than that. I mean, I think it's the fact that we need to develop a new model of growth as we go forward civilizationally.
This presentation is brought to you by Arizona State University's Julianne Wrigley Global Institute of Sustainability for educational and non-commercial use only.